Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into a career that sounds straight out of a movie set?
Sounds intriguing. What are we exploring today?
We're tackling tracer powder blender.
Okay, now that's a job title you don't hear every day.
Right. It definitely caught my eye. And to help us decode this intriguing career path, we're turning to RoleCatcher.
Ah, yes, RoleCatcher. Like a treasure trove of career insights. What do they have to say about this one?
Well, first off, before we all start picturing someone in a smoky lab dramatically tossing powders around,
Yeah, let's get the Hollywood image out of our heads.
exactly, RoleCatcher really emphasizes the balance between precision and safety in this role.
Makes sense. We're talking about the ingredients for things that go boom, right? Not exactly a casual mixing and matching situation.
Not at all. It's about those igniters you see in fireworks. Or even, yes, the tracer rounds that leave those trails of light in action movies.
So we're talking chemicals, machinery, high stakes.
Definitely. And those dazzling effects we see on screen, they rely on incredibly precise formulas.
I can only imagine. We're dealing with flammable mixtures here. Precision isn't just about quality, it's about safety, too.
Exactly. And speaking of the work environment, it doesn't sound like your typical quiet lab.
Oh, what does the guide say?
They paint a pretty vivid picture. You think a bustling factory floor, the hum of machinery, maybe a slight scent of chemicals in the air, even a bit of vibration underfoot.
Wow, so not exactly a Zen garden. It sounds like you'd have to be comfortable with a certain level of sensory stimulation.
For sure. And that actually makes me wonder about the future of this job, with all the talk about automation these days.
Yeah, could we start seeing robots on that factory floor anytime soon?
It's a good question, especially in a field like this where technology is evolving so rapidly. Today, tracer powder blenders work hands-on with these potentially volatile materials. But who knows what tomorrow holds?
It's fascinating to think about. Could computer-controlled systems and sensors take over some of those repetitive tasks?
Maybe even make the process even more efficient and safe. It's not outside the realm of possibility.
It really makes you wonder how technology might reshape this entire career path in the years to come.
It really does. But okay, let's bring it back to the here and now. If you're listening to this and thinking, is this career right for me? Well, RoleCatcher lays out some pros and cons to help you figure that out.
Always helpful to weigh those. What jumps out at you?
Well, they highlight high demand as a major plus.
Which translates to job security. Especially in today's job market, that stability can be a huge weight off your shoulders.
For sure. But here's something I didn't expect. They also mention opportunities for creativity.
Now that's intriguing. How does that work in a job that seems so, well, process-driven?
Right, but it sounds like even though those formulas are strict, there's still room for innovation.
So maybe finding ways to make the process more efficient, experimenting with new types of powders to create different effects.
Exactly. Maybe the next big summer blockbuster will have a new kind of explosion, all thanks to a creative tracer powder blender.
Now that's a cool thought. But like any job, it can't be all exciting formulas and blockbuster moments. What about the downsides?
Well, the guide does point out that the work can get pretty repetitive.
Which makes sense, given the level of precision required. If you thrive on constant variety, new challenges every day, this might not be the ideal environment.
True. But on the flip side, that same repetitiveness can lead to a predictable schedule, maybe a good work-life balance. It all comes down to your priorities.
It's all about trade-offs, figuring out what matters most to you in a career.
It really makes you think about what matters most to you in a job. Now, let's say this whole tracer powder blender thing has piqued your interest. What's the path to actually making it a career?
Well, RoleCatcher does a nice job of breaking down those career stages for us.
Perfect. What do they say?
So you'd typically start at an entry level, right?
Makes sense. Start at the bottom and work your way up.
And the guide emphasizes that at that stage, it's really about assisting the more experienced blenders.
Learning the ropes, I imagine.
Exactly, mastering those safety procedures.
Because when you're dealing with potentially volatile materials.
Yeah, you don't want to be the person who sets off the fireworks on their first day.
Definitely not. So lots of learning on the job. What comes next?
So as you gain that experience, you start moving up the ladder. And RoleCatcher explains that the role starts to evolve. It becomes less about the hands-on mixing and more about strategy and process improvement.
Interesting. So you might even be responsible for implementing some of those automation technologies we were discussing earlier.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that RoleCatcher includes these profiles of actual tracer powder blenders.
Oh, that's really helpful to kind of put a human face on what could seem like a very technical job.
It makes it more relatable. So let's say you've browsed through RoleCatcher, you've seen those career paths, maybe even connected with those profiles. Now you're ready to land the gig. They even offer some sample interview questions, which I always find incredibly helpful.
Oh yeah, those can be really revealing. Any stand out to you, like something that really gives you a sense of what it takes to succeed in this field?
Well, one that jumped out at me was, how do you troubleshoot blending problems? They're really looking for problem-solving skills, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's not just about following a formula. You need to be able to think on your feet, adapt to unexpected situations.
Exactly. And here's another question that caught my eye. How do you stay up to date in a field that's constantly evolving? It speaks to the importance of continuous learning, especially in a field like this where technology is changing so rapidly.
It's that whole lifelong learner mentality, which is becoming more and more crucial these days, no matter what field you're in.
Absolutely. And that actually ties back to what we were discussing earlier about automation. RoleCatcher seems to emphasize how technology is impacting not just the work itself, but also the skills needed to thrive in these evolving fields.
It's a huge factor to consider, and not just specific to tracer powder blending. That whole interplay between human expertise and automation is something we're seeing across so many industries these days.
It really is.
So as we think about the future of this job, and maybe even the future of work in general, it makes you wonder, is this one of those fields where human expertise will always be essential? Or will robots eventually take over? It's a big question, isn't it? Where does that human element fit in as technology advances?
Right, because on one hand, you have this need for real precision, for understanding those chemical reactions, and that's not always easy to replicate with a machine.
Exactly. It's like, can a robot really look at a batch of powder and just, sense that something's off, like an experienced human blender could?
That's the thing, isn't it? Robots are great at following instructions, at doing things over and over perfectly.
No coffee breaks needed for those robots.
Exactly, but that human touch, that instinct, being able to adapt on the fly, those are really valuable skills.
Makes you wonder if the future of this job isn't about robots replacing humans completely, but more about changing how they work together.
Right, like maybe it becomes less about physically blending the powders and more about overseeing the whole process.
Managing those automated systems, ensuring the quality stays top-notch.
Exactly. So the tracer powder blender of the future might be more of a programmer, a supervisor, someone who's really an expert in quality control.
Overseeing a whole army of robot mixers. It's a pretty different picture from what we started with, isn't it?
It is. We went from someone in a lab coat, surrounded by beakers, to someone in a high-tech control room, analyzing data, fine-tuning all this sophisticated machinery.
And that shift, that change in the kind of skills needed, it's something to think about, not just for someone who wants to be a tracer powder blender, but for anyone entering the workforce, really.
It's a good point. What will set you apart in a world where technology keeps changing things? What skills will be most valuable?
Those are questions we should all be asking ourselves no matter what field we're in. And I think resources like RoleCatcher, they give us a really useful framework for thinking about this stuff.
Absolutely. They help us explore a career path, see what skills are needed, even get a glimpse into the future of that field like we did today.
They're a great place to start for anyone who's curious about different careers. And let's be honest, a job title like Tracer Powder Blender, that's definitely sparked some curiosity.
It definitely got our attention. But beyond the cool factor, this deep dive has shown us that even a job that seems really specialized can give us insights into the bigger picture of work.
Absolutely. The need for precision, safety, how technology is changing things, being able to adapt. These are important in so many fields.
I couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway for me is to stay curious, stay in the loop, and don't be afraid to explore those less conventional career paths.
Because you never know what you might discover about yourself and the future of work. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of tracer powder blending. And remember, sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most interesting discoveries. Until next time, keep exploring.